Hey everyone, ready to get a little uncomfortable?
Oh, are we diving into that topic?
We are. Today, we're taking on bullying. But not just the surface stuff.
We're going deep.
Deep. Beyond the headlines. Beyond those videos that just make your stomach turn.
Sounds intense. Where are we starting?
Our guide for this deep dive is a commentary from CNA by psychiatrist Dr. Lim Boon Lang.
Okay, I'm familiar with his work.
Great. The title is Commentary. To address bullying, we must understand what drives children to harm others.
Gets right to the point, doesn't it?
It does. And that's our mission today. Why?
Why bullying happens at all.
Exactly. Why do kids become bullies in the first place?
Well, Dr. Lim makes it clear right away.
Let me guess, it's not a new problem.
Not at all. He actually kicks things off, reminding us that this has been around, well, forever.
Forever. Come on. It feels like we hear about bullying so much more now than we used to.
I get it, with social media and all that.
Right. It's constant. So if it's not a new problem, why does it feel so much worse now?
That's where Dr. Lim brings in this criminology theory, the routine activity theory.
Okay, now it sounds complicated.
It's actually pretty straightforward. Basically, it says for a crime to occur, and yeah, bullying can be a crime, you need three things to come together.
A recipe for disaster.
Exactly. A motivated offender, someone who's driven to bully. A suitable target, someone vulnerable. And lastly, no capable guardian.
So no one to step in and stop it.
Right. No teacher, parent, or even another kid who could intervene.
And these factors have always existed.
Sadly, yes. That's why bullying itself isn't new.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But it's still kind of theoretical, isn't it?
You want a real-world example?
Always.
Imagine a crowded school hallway passing period, right? You've got a kid who's feeling a little insecure, maybe new to the school.
Okay, I can picture it. Definitely a suitable target.
Right. Then there's a kid who really wants attention, gets a thrill out of putting others down.
That's our motivated offender. But what if there's a teacher nearby?
Ugh, there's that capable guardian. But if there isn't, that's when things can go wrong really fast.
That hallway scenario is a little too real for me. But it makes the theory make sense. So we've got the environment, the victim. But what about that first element?
The motivated offender.
Yeah. What pushes a kid to become a bully?
That's the question, isn't it? And as you might guess, there's no single easy answer.
Figures.
But Dr. Lim does a great job laying out a whole spectrum of motivations. Some are more extreme than others. On one end, you have psychopathy.
Whoa, wait a minute. Psychopaths.
Yeah.
We're talking about kids who are like mini Dexter.
It's not usually that dramatic, but you're in the right ballpark. We're talking about children who genuinely lack empathy. They just don't understand or care about how others feel.
That's chilling.
And it often goes beyond just bullying. Dr. Lim points out that these kids can display some pretty disturbing behaviors. Animal cruelty, lying constantly, even vandalizing things.
I'm guessing that's not the majority of bullies, though.
You're right. Thankfully, true psychopathy in children is really rare.
Okay, good. Because that's scary.
The vast majority of bullies, they aren't these, cold-hearted villains. Their motivations tend to be much more complex.
More about their social situations.
Their struggles, their environments, all of that.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What are some of the more common reasons a kid might become a bully?
Dr. Lim actually cites this 2010 study from the US. It found some interesting trends among young bullies. Many of them had difficulty with things like resolving conflicts. They struggled academically.
So maybe they fell behind in school.
It's possible. Lots of them also had really poor self-esteem or came from homes that were, well, pretty rough.
So maybe they're lashing out because they're hurting.
That's a big part of it. But then on top of all of that, you've got peer pressure, especially for teenagers.
That desperate need to fit in.
Right, and even to be dominant in their social groups. It's a powerful motivator.
And that's where it gets really tricky, right? Because sometimes the bullying isn't really even about the victim.
It's about the audience.
Those other kids watching.
Exactly. And this need to impress, it's only gotten worse with social media.
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. Lim really emphasizes how social media adds a whole new level of complexity to bullying.
Like how?
Well, now you've got kids bullying just for the video. For the likes, the shares.
So it's almost like bullying as entertainment.
In a really twisted way, yeah. And that online fame, even if it's for something awful, is a powerful motivator.
It's a disturbing thought. So we've talked about the kid who's maybe hurting, the kid who wants to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
But what about kids who are bullied themselves?
The bully-victim cycle.
So they become the bully.
It's sadly more common than you might think. Imagine a kid who's constantly picked on, made to feel powerless.
I can see how that would mess you up.
When they finally have a chance to be powerful, to exert that control over someone else, they can become the bully.
So it's a way to regain control.
After feeling helpless for so long, yeah.
That is just so sad. But it does explain why this behavior keeps repeating.
It's a tough cycle to break. And then there's another category of bullies that Dr. Lim talks about, the ones who make things even more confusing.
Oh.
He calls it the harmless fun fallacy.
Harmless fun. That sounds almost innocent.
But these are the bullies who genuinely don't seem to get how much they're hurting others. They think they're just teasing.
Even when it's obviously not.
Exactly. It's that boys will be boys attitude. Dr. Lim calls it out specifically.
I remember hearing that so much growing up.
It's frustrating because it just completely dismisses how the victim feels.
And it makes it seem like bullying is no big deal.
Right. Dr. Lim is clear about that. This kind of thinking totally downplays the damage, emotional and psychological, that bullying causes.
So how does a parent deal with this? What if they find out their own child is the bully?
That's got to be one of the hardest things to face as a parent.
I can't imagine.
But Dr. Lim has some advice. He says resist those knee-jerk reactions.
Like anger, punishment.
All of that.
Yeah.
Instead, he really emphasizes calm conversation.
So try to figure out why they're doing it.
Exactly. Is it peer pressure? Are they mirroring something they've seen at home or with friends? Is there something deeper going on emotionally?
So the punishment comes later.
It's not even the main focus, really. Dr. Lim is really clear that punishment alone won't fix the root cause.
He says parents have to work with the school.
Big time. Utilize resources like counseling, those social emotional learning programs.
It's a team effort then.
Definitely. And then, of course, you've got the whole added challenge of raising kids in the digital age.
So don't remind me.
Parents have to be so aware of what their kids are doing online, set really clear boundaries about appropriate behavior.
It's a whole other layer of parenting, isn't it?
Absolutely. But ultimately, what Dr. Lim says is the most powerful tool we have against bullying. It all comes back to empathy.
Empathy. It seems like that word comes up a lot when we talk about difficult issues.
But it's especially important here.
What does Dr. Lim say about how it relates to bullying?
He actually makes this very important distinction between empathy and sympathy.
Okay, I'm listening.
Sympathy, that's about feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is about really stepping into their shoes, trying to understand their emotions.
Even if you don't agree with their actions.
Even then, and that's a tough one.
So you're saying we need to empathize with the bully. How do we even begin to do that?
Well, that's where we'll pick up next time. So how do we teach kids to actually empathize with a bully?
It feels almost impossible. Like, how can you understand someone who's hurting you?
It's a tough one, no doubt. But Dr. Lim has some really interesting thoughts on this. He actually suggests role-playing.
Role-playing, like
Yeah.
acting it out.
Yeah. By literally stepping into the shoes of both the bully and the victim, kids can start to really grasp those emotional consequences we talked about earlier.
That's a neat idea. It's like walking a mile in someone else's shoes.
Exactly. It forces them to see things from a totally different perspective.
Makes sense. But what about communication? I mean, can that help?
Dr. Lim talks a lot about that too. He emphasizes how crucial it is to have open communication.
So parents need to talk to their kids about this.
Not just parents, teachers, friends. We all need to create those safe spaces.
Where kids feel like they can actually talk about what's going on.
Yeah, whether they've been bullied or even if they've been the bully.
So it's not about lecturing them on how to behave.
No, it's about really listening.
Without judgment.
Exactly. It's about letting them know it's okay to open up, to share their feelings, their fears, without getting in trouble.
Okay, that sounds good in theory. But what about those kids who are just too scared to speak up?
That's a real problem, and is where bystanders become so important.
Bystanders? You mean the other kids who are watching this happen?
Yeah, they can actually shift the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Dr. Lim talks about how often bullies rely on that silence.
On everyone else just standing there and doing nothing.
Right. They need an audience. They need that validation. But if their peers start speaking up, even in small ways,
Like saying, hey, this isn't cool.
even just walking away, it takes away some of the bully's power.
So those little acts of defiance can actually make a difference.
A huge difference. And bystanders can do so much to support the victim, too. Just a kind word, walking with them to class.
It shows them they're not alone.
Exactly. Someone cares.
This is making me think back to that capable guardian idea from the routine activity theory.
Oh, yeah.
bystanders can actually be those guardians, right?
They can step in and break up that perfect storm we were talking about. But it's not just about being brave in the moment.
It's about changing the whole culture.
Yes, making it clear that bullying is never okay. And that's where schools have such a critical role to play.
Okay, so what are some things schools can do to create that kind of environment? What did Dr. Lim recommend?
Well, he's a huge advocate for social emotional learning programs, and for good reason.
What do those programs do?
They teach kids these really essential life skills, things like resolving conflicts, managing their emotions.
And learning to stay calm.
Yes. And empathy building is a big part of it, too.
So instead of just reacting in the heat of the moment.
They learn to pause, think things through, try to see other people's perspectives.
Sounds like a pretty valuable skill set.
It is, and it's a shift from punishment to prevention, right?
Teaching kids to be proactive.
Exactly. But schools also need those clear, consistent policies, too.
Like a zero-tolerance policy for bullying.
Exactly. Clear consequences for the bully. And training for teachers so they can recognize and respond to these situations effectively.
So it's about a system of support, not just one-off efforts.
You got it. But it's also about more than just rules and consequences.
What do you mean?
It's about the whole school culture, building that sense of respect and inclusivity, making sure every student feels safe and valued.
And comfortable speaking up if something's wrong.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where bullying just can't thrive.
So you're tackling it from all angles.
That's how real change happens, not just dealing with individual incidents, but preventing them in the first place.
I have to admit, this has been really eye-opening. Bullying is so much more complex than I realized.
It's not just about telling kids don't bully, right?
There's so much more to it.
It's a multi-pronged approach. Everyone needs to be involved. Parents, educators, the community. But there's good news.
Oh, tell me there's good news.
Dr. Lim believes a lot of bullies can actually outgrow these behaviors.
They can change?
Especially with early intervention. He highlights those programs that focus on empathy and emotional regulation.
The ones we were just talking about.
Right. They help kids develop that self-awareness, learn how to manage those big emotions, and build healthier relationships.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
And for more serious cases, professional counseling can make a huge difference.
Well, bullying's a big problem. It's not hopeless?
Not at all. It's amazing how much our understanding of bullying has changed.
How so?
It wasn't that long ago that it was just dismissed as kids being kids.
I remember hearing that a lot.
But now we're starting to really see the impact it can have, and we're looking for real solutions.
You're finally shining a light on it.
And it's not just about protecting the victims. It's about helping the bullies, too.
Helping them find a different path.
Exactly. They're kids, too, remember? Often struggling in their own ways.
And with the right support.
They can learn and grow.
It's about breaking that cycle of hurt.
That's a great way to put it. And, it all comes back to empathy.
So how do we actually put that into practice? How do we teach kids to understand, to even care about someone who's hurting them?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's what we're going to explore as we wrap up this deep dive.
All right, let's tackle this. How do we actually teach empathy? Especially when it comes to someone who's being hurtful.
It does seem a little backwards, doesn't it?
It does.
But one thing Dr. Lim is really clear about, empathy isn't about saying bad behavior is okay.
So it's not about making excuses.
No. It's about remembering that everyone is human.
Even people who mess up.
Even then. He actually uses this really great analogy. Imagine a kid throwing rocks.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Our first reaction is probably anger, right?
I'd want to punish them. Stop them from throwing rocks.
But what if instead of just reacting to the action, we paused and asked why?
Why are you throwing rocks?
Exactly. Are you hurting and angry? Are you trying to get someone's attention?
Wow. That is a totally different way of looking at it.
It's a shift in focus from the behavior itself to the emotion behind it.
So maybe that kid is throwing rocks because they feel lonely.
Or powerless. Or maybe they've only seen aggression used to solve problems.
So instead of just stop throwing rocks, it's tell me what's going on.
And that opens the door for empathy.
It lets you see them as a whole person, not just a problem.
Exactly. And that's so important.
Okay, but how do we use this to actually deal with bullying? What are some real strategies?
Well, one approach that's gaining a lot of traction is something called restorative justice.
Restorative justice, I haven't heard of that.
It's a model that's less focused on punishment and more about repairing harm, rebuilding relationships.
Okay, I like the sound of that. But how does it work with bullying?
So let's say a student has been bullying a classmate.
Pretty common scenario.
Instead of just suspension, a restorative justice approach might be to bring the bully and the victim together, with a facilitator, of course.
So they can talk to each other
Yes, they can share how they feel, talk about the impact the bullying has had.
and actually work together to figure out how to fix it.
Right, so the victim feels heard and the bully takes responsibility,
But it's not about letting them off easy.
right? It's about guiding them to make a real change.
That just seems so much more helpful than just detention or something.
And there's research showing that it works. Restorative justice programs can really reduce bullying, and it improves the whole school climate.
So it's not just about individual kids.
It's about changing the whole culture of the school.
Amazing. It sounds like we've got a lot of work to do.
We do, but it starts with each of us.
What can we do, even if we aren't parents or teachers, to fight bullying?
Start with the little things. Speak up when you see something wrong, even if it feels awkward. Model respectful behavior. Teach kids about kindness. And be willing to have those tough conversations,
So we need to create a world where everyone feels safe and respected.
where empathy is just the way things are, not some special exception.
Well, I feel like I've learned so much from this deep dive.
It's been quite a journey exploring all these different aspects.
It really has.
Yeah.
We've learned about why bullying happens, how much it hurts, and the power of empathy.
And how we can all play a part in stopping it.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this question. What one small act of empathy can you commit to today? It could be reaching out to someone who's struggling, or speaking up when you see something unfair, even just listening with compassion. Every bit of empathy makes a difference. It creates a kinder world for all of us.